guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Yeah, this guy's got to be a point for him. Thought he was some tough calls out there, and just got to play through them. He's got to just trust that it'll come back around to him at some point in time, and tried to stick up for him. I thought that over the last 2 days that he got pushed around a lot, unnecessarily so, and he tried to fight back, but yeah, he's got to try to control it a little bit better.
I told you guys just to pump your brakes on this Wolves team a little bit. I've been telling you guys have been too high on the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
Well, listen, got to give it more than 2 games, and you guys just blew through the stop sign.
I remember what you said. Yeah, because you're like, just calm down. Calm down. It's the Wolves.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid yet.
Declan and I are like, oh my God, no, you don't understand.
Jaden McDaniels, all defensive team, first team. Yep, I'm all in.
LOB. I brought it up yesterday. LOB parade route.
35 wins over under, and you guys are like, oh, it's got to be way higher than that. And I'm like, I don't know.
And then I started talking about the Jordan Bulls and records, and
you blow through that yield sign. There's no yield sign right now. It's right into the oncoming traffic.
It feels like you guys.
It's the Autobahn. It's the Autobahn.
Yeah, it feels like I've seen it all before. Calm down, you guys. And we're like, no, we won't calm down.
The funny thing is, I have seen it all before, and I still ignore all of the traffic signs.
Yes, you do.
4-way stop sign. Who's that guy going 55 miles an hour through? Oh my God!
You are a hopeless Wolves romantic, is what you are.
Yeah. So, this is Mackey and Judd, daily Minnesota sports entertainment, and the Timberwolves are above 500 after the first 3 games. So there's that to celebrate. But last night was kind of a disaster. We'll get to who gets it, who doesn't, and random season recall on the show. But what I'd like this to be a little bit of maybe a therapy session, if you guys would indulge me, because Judd was at the game last night. And I'm curious to get your firsthand thoughts. The media row, is it still like right next to the Wolves bench?
Yes, in fact, I was right by the bench. I could hear stuff last night. It was great.
So we'll get some Judd insights here. But if you were to have asked me before the season, we didn't spend a ton of time on the yield and stop signs with the Wolves because everything was great. Like, look at how they're playing joyful basketball and everyone loves each other, and they're playing defense, and then those things were apparent in the first 2 games. But if you would have asked me before the season, all right, what are some of your biggest Wolves fears? Things that could derail games or the season. The 2 biggest ones popped up last night. Number 1 fear, I'm always a little nervous that DAngelo Russell is a fake max player. I'm always sitting there. Even back to last year, it's like, man, guy makes a lot of money relative to the cap, but then he just kind of disappears, and then he doesn't play much defense. And last night, Pelicans at home, he starts 1 for 10. I don't think he made a shot in the first half, and almost all of his shots are taken out of the flow of the offense on nights like that, where it's like, all right, I'm just going to jack a 3 here with 17 seconds on the shot clock, hand in my face for no reason, right?
Yeah.
So fear number 1, being nervous about D'Lo being a fake max player, and like last night he was a fake max player. And fear number 2 is that Karl-Anthony Towns is oftentimes really easy to knock off his game if you get really physical with him, or if calls start going against him, which, by the way, that happens. He got screwed on some calls last night. It happens. You got, like Chris Finch said, you got to just, he literally threw a temper tantrum at one point, stomping up and down and like clapping his hands while the ball was going back the other way in transition. Ed Malloy, as any Timberwolves fan that goes back 10 or 15 years, thanks to Alan Horton knows, is a terrible referee. Oh, Ed Malloy! Oh, Ed Malloy! But like, dude, teams are going to get physical with you. You think Kobe sat there and just threw tantrums on the court? Like, no, those guys, he'd get mad. Tim Duncan complained about calls, but you can't let it consume you the way that it did for him. And then you watch him, and he's like rifling passes harder to his teammates, and he's testing the waters with hard screens because he's just defiantly, he's mad. So D'Lo and Cat sort of at their worst, and Cat still found a way to put up a bunch of points, rebounds, and assists, and he put up a good box score, but I'm not saying those 2 things are going to happen on a nightly basis, but like those 2 things are things to be fearful about if you're a Wolves fan, and they both happened last night, and that's a big part of the reason why they lost. So
yeah, let's explore the cat thing first, because I think to me that's probably the headline of the game, because I think that the Pelicans aren't good, like they're just not, and the Wolves are an improving team, but to what you're saying, Phil, if the Wolves don't take steps in certain areas where they obviously can, like the cat thing, he can mature. Like I know it's incredible because I think he's in year 7 now, and we're still going through the same thing. And every year he says, that was the old cat. I'm the new cat. But first of all, now, I don't think that this is his team. I think it's Ant's team. I think Pat Bev, who I'd like to talk about, plays a huge role right now. But, in Cat's mind, after opening night, he talked about, this is my team. I lead this team. Well, if you're going to lead this team, you can't get upset every time the officiating is bad. And the other thing is, this has happened 2 consecutive nights. And in my old age, this drives me crazy now. It drives me crazy when the home team gets impacted by the officiating because the crowd is. On Sunday night, the Wild got jobbed too a few times. Number one, it evens out. Like the fans don't cheer the refs when they give you a good call. They boo the refs when they don't. So in the big picture, throughout the course of an 82-game season in both hockey and basketball, it evens out. So like you're going to get bad calls. You're going to get good calls, and Cat doesn't run up to the officials and say thanks for that call. So if the fans get mad and chant ref you suck, which they like to now, that's great. They buy tickets. They should do what you want. The players on the home team cannot be impacted by that. That's not their job. They play too many games to allow that to alter what they are trying to do. And the thing with Cat is, and this is where what you said, Phil, I think is spot on. Last night, Cat got 2 fouls against him. He didn't get about 2 or 3 calls. He got a T. He got lifted because of the 2 fouls. And then he pouted. And I'm not talking about for a brief period. I'm talking about he went to the bench and pouted. And on press row, at one point, there was a call that went against the Wolves with Cat off the floor. And I swear to God, he looked like some of the dudes in grade school I played basketball with, throwing his head back like, I can't believe we didn't get that call either. It's 82 games. It doesn't matter. Like, you didn't get the call. Okay. But if you're going to lead, at one point, and our friend Dane Moore tweeted this, at one point, we all saw, during a timeout, Patrick Beverley got up from the bench and said, quit effing talking to them. Mm-hmm. That's Patrick Beverley, one of the most notorious agitators, I believe, the last time I checked, who, by the way, I absolutely love. He is one of my favorite players now. But Patrick Beverley told, and it was mainly directed at Cat, quit talking to them. The officials, it's doing you no good. And so if Karl in his mind wants to lead, this has to stop. It's not possible. He is costing it. It throws everybody's flow off when, except for like Ant and Pat Bev, it throws everybody else off when Karl-Anthony Towns is melting down like he's my teammate at St. Therese on a Sunday and we're in 8th grade.
I remember, so you guys know I used to be in the poker industry, like back in the boom era, like 2007 through like 2010. And I used to run a company, and then I also used to play poker for rent money. Like, I never made millions of dollars or anything, but like played a lot of poker. But I had some friends who were like higher level players. One of them was super emotional, like played poker for a living. In which, by the way, if you enter into playing poker for a living, you're going to take what's called bad beats sometimes, where you get your money in with aces, they get their money in with tens, and you got an 80% chance to win the hand, but there's always the 20% chance that a 10 could hit and you lose the pot. Like when you enter into a life of playing poker, you are entering a life of, even if I'm doing all the things that I should be doing, I'm going to get like chunks of money taken away from me, and hopefully over the course of time, I'm making a lot more money than I'm taking. I remember one time, one of my emotionless robot poker friends went up to my emotional friend after he like lost a hand online. and threw his mouse off the wall and whipped his keyboard, like broke his keyboard, and was like F-bomb. It was like a big pot, like, you know, a couple $1,000s or something, and it was like F-bombs, and emotionless robot friend walked in the room and said, "Are you going to do that after every, like, are you going to do this all the time? Because we can't be friends. Like, we can't roll in the same circle. You're going to lose hands, dude. Like, you signed up for a life where you're going to lose hands. You need to be an emotionless robot and just deal with it. Just build it into your subconscious that, like, I'm going to lose hands. I need to deal with it without freaking out." And and maybe Pat Beverly can be that for Karl-Anthony Towns. My man, you've chosen the life of professional basketball. You're going to get the ball more than almost anyone on the team. Therefore, you're going to have more opportunities to be fouled than almost anyone on the team because you're playing from inside, outside, like you're grabbing rebounds. Guys are going to be hanging off your arms and stuff. Every single night, the officials are going to miss probably 5 calls on you. Every night. Are you going to do this? Literally every night? Every single time. Like, these officials are going to miss calls.
Yep.
Nothing you do, no amount of complaining is going to change the fact that Ed Malloy is an idiot. And his staff oftentimes gravitates toward being bad as well. So be an emotionless robot and just go about your business. Get it back on the next one. And I'm just trying to envision, like, if the Wolves are going to get to the playoffs, which we hope that they will, and you're in a rough and tumble series with the Dallas Mavericks or something in the Western Conference playoffs, and officials are letting stuff go because it's playoff time, baby. They're going to swallow the whistles.
Right.
What are you going to do? Are you going to bitch for 2.5 hours? Or are you going to rise above it and handle it with some sort of poise, right? Like, that's what we need to see from Karl-Anthony Towns.
And it's not even the getting mad part that bugs me. If you're going to get mad. Get teed up. What bugs me is the pouting. What bugs me is the whining. He whines like a grade school kid. That's what has to end. So like, I mean, if you want to get mad, like if you get screwed and you want to get mad, go ahead and get mad. But 2 things. 1, get mad. Don't pout and don't whine. He's incessantly whining and complaining, which to me is far worse than being mad. The other thing is get mad and then it's done. So what I didn't like last night is I really thought the first 2 quarters for Cat were ruined because he went and pouted.
And then they're down by 13.
Yeah,
because,
but I mean, if you want to be pissed off, and then Chris Finch did exactly what a coach is supposed to do. When there was a really bad call against Cat, he got teed up. And if I was Finch, that's what I would say. It's my job to get mad. It's my job to get teed up. But if you are going to go from being mad to a pout, I don't even want to see you get mad then, because now it's counterproductive. He literally was on the bench with his head hung, quit watching the game basically, and was pouting.
Yeah,
I love that productive for a grown man.
I love that Finch took the technical because there were a couple. Admittedly, the refs were bad last night.
Ed Malloy's not good. Yeah, but there's a lot of bad officials. There's a lot of bad umpires.
And at one point, Chris Finch got the technical. At another point, I think it might have been second half. At some point, like he pulls Ant and Karl aside coming out of a timeout, puts his arms around them, and he's like telling them. I couldn't read all of his lips, but he's like, "Hey, focus, quit doing this." You were sitting right there. What was Patrick Beverley's influence throughout the night with someone? Because I got to think that, like, he'll complain to officials too.
Oh, and
I don't think, like, I almost feel like it's in a different way. Like, he remains channeled, and Kat sometimes, like, starts to disengage a little bit or get sucked into things. I mean, Beverly shoved Chris Paul in the back, so he gets sucked into things too. But there's a little bit of a difference, I feel like. How was he handling it last night?
So he handles it like a captain would, and especially in my sport, hockey, which is you address the ref. You might drop an F-bomb. I don't know. I don't care. But then it's done. So, like, he gets mad. Pat Bev, I think it's pretty smart in the sense that I think he's got a temper that is very quick, and then it's done, though.
Yeah, he kind of flushes it. He kind of flushes it.
That's what Cat needs to do. That's my biggest point with Cat. It's not the immediate being pissed off. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that it alters his game after that for minutes, for halves. That's what's inexcusable. If you got screwed and you want to say, I got, but the problem with Cat too is it's every call he doesn't get. A guy who had this exact same problem for a briefer period than Cat, when Wayne Gretzky started, he did this all the time. And I mean, he was the world's best player. So he would get, again, if you're good, you're going to get fouled or hooked or leaned on because guys don't know how to stop you. So Gretzky, for like the first 2 or 3 years, every time he got hooked, every time he got a check he didn't like, he would complain. And he finally said, I have to stop. Like because the officials quit listening. Yeah. Now, in Gretzky's case, he did. But what Cat has to know, he does not deserve, in some ways, any calls because every call's a foul to him.
And he hasn't done anything meaningful in the postseason or anything. And you could argue, well, that's not an excuse for Ed Malloy to be an idiot referee. Well, no, but it's the human nature. Like, they don't view Karl-Anthony Towns like they view LeBron James.
Correct. Absolutely.
So you got to deal with it.
And the thing, too, is, Phil, and this is true of every single sport. If you become known as a whiner and constant complainer, the good officials are going to tune you out. So forget Ed. Ed does stick. But like across the board, if you become the guy who is always, and Cat is this, flailing your arms and getting up with that, what, you're not calling that look? Good officials are going to say, benefit of the doubt, I don't think so.
What about the D'Lo part of this? Because that's my other fear is, man, like everything is kumbaya. Those guys were all spreading the ball around, preseason. And, okay, regular season, D'Lo hasn't looked quite as good as the other two in the big three, quote unquote, that they have. And last night, he was a primary reason why they were down by double digits early. He's just not engaged offensively. At some point, do we have Ant Edwards clip? We'll get to that at some point. Or we have a Finch clip on D'Lo.
We have a Finch clip talking about D'Lo.
Because Ant dropped a couple words that we can't say here on our show that gets also repurposed to the radio. But Ant basically said, we need to we're not the only effing 3 players on this team. Like, we need to. What Ant said after the game last night was great leadership. Let's play this Finch clip. This is Finch on D'Lo's cold start.
Listen, every player goes through a slump at some point in the season. His just happens to be right now, and we're starting. He's got to, he's not the only one that's not particularly shooting the ball well, but yeah, he'll be fine. We try and get him going early in the game today, but he'll be fine. I'm not worried too much. So.
The problem is, a lot of guys are going to have bad shooting nights, but when you have a bad shooting night, can you find a way to get to the line 10 times? Can you find a way to get 11 assists, right? Yep. And he's not oftentimes that player. Like, if he goes 3 for 14, which is going to happen, he doesn't also find a way to get to the line. He doesn't also find a way to impact the game in a big way defensively. If he goes 3 for 14, he's kind of worthless.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Now, I didn't see the game on Saturday, but if I'm not mistaken, on Saturday, Jordan McLaughlin didn't get into that game until the final quarter. Last night, Jordan played, let's see here. How much time?
Played 11 minutes.
Yes.
And it was a disaster, by the way.
Right.
His 11 minutes were a disaster.
Right. But D'Lo, who ended up playing about 29, D'Lo basically, for a portion of the third quarter at least, was benched. And I think there's a conversation here to be had about 2 guys in particular who clearly need to find their role and their way with this team if it's going to work. DAngelo Russell is number 1. He needs to, because Phil, I think what you're talking about is this. This is Ant and Cat's team. And D'Lo can play an incredibly important role here, but make no mistake, it's a role. It's not, if there's a big 3, it's, in my opinion, 1A is Ant, 1B is Cat, and D'Lo's 3. So, like, there's no 2 then. There's no 3 musketeers. And I think DAngelo is struggling a little bit to find, or I don't think. What I can see is he's struggling a little bit to find that role, because I think his perception is, hey, it's me and it's Cat and it's young Ant and we're all going to be great together. And it's like, well, really, D'Lo, you need to facilitate for those 2. And D'Lo came down, so they put him back in. I think it was in the fourth quarter last night, and he did exactly what you were talking about earlier. He came down the floor and jacked up a shot, and it's like, dude, that's not. And I think that
everything was short last night too.
And Ant, but I mean, Ant in the third quarter should have been, and was to a certain point, ridden for how good he was. Like, ride him, just go with him. And the second guy, and it's not as big of a deal, but he was 1 of 8 from the field last night and 1 for 7 from 3-point range. Malik Beasley. These two need to identify their roles, and probably most importantly, if they're going to be part of this team and be productive, understand their roles. And I think that they are still both think of themselves as, I'm DAngelo Russell. I'm really good. And you are, but you've got a role. I'm Malik Beasley. I'm really good. I got to get mine. That's not going to work here. So those two, but yes, starting with Russell, those two definitely have to figure out how to fit in, but make no mistake, it's fitting in. It's not, I'm going to be a main solution here. You're going to be part of the solution, but this team starts with 2 guys. This team flat out starts with Cat and Ant.
Yep, and I will say, like, this was always going to be a process. Like, it was great the first game, and you're like, oh my God, maybe this is all just gelling. Like, this is going to take. Remember when the 2003-04, like the last really good Timberwolves team, when they went to the Western Conference Finals, and so they brought Cassell and Sprewell in, and they kind of overhauled the roster for KG, right? They brought in two new sidekicks. It took that team like 20 games before they really figured out what everyone's role was. And that's veterans. And I get that those guys had never played together before, and a lot of these guys actually have last year, but not really. Like, Towns, Edwards, and Russell have not played. What have they played together? Like maybe 10, 15 games, all healthy at the same time?
Yeah,
like
I don't know, but
not many.
Not a lot. No,
maybe 20. I'd have to see. So
you're right.
You got a new coach, so you're kind of starting over this year. And as fun as that first game was, it's probably going to take like 20 games before everyone kind of figures out what their role is. On Beasley, a lot of it's just shot making. I mean, he's gonna jack 7 threes. Last night he hit 1 of them. He's had some trouble finding his shot. If he drains 4 threes last night, we're sitting here saying, all right, Beasley off the bench, baby. Right. Light it up from 3. I want D'Lo. I want his main focus, and he has done this at times. His main focus needs to be ego-free ball movement and facilitating for Towns, Edwards first. And when you do that, the ball will eventually come back around to you. You'll get yours. But like if he goes into every game and thinks to himself, how can I facilitate for Towns, Edwards, and the role players that can shoot threes and slash?
Right.
Basically, how can I get like 12 assists tonight? And through that process, it'll come back around, and you'll also probably get 18 to 20 points. It might not be that you're, the main focus offensively on every possession, but that's what I'd really love to see from D'Lo long term this year.
I think there's 2 things there, though. So one is, yes, it might take 20 games, 25 games for them to mesh. Okay. That is a doable thing. But what's most important to me is the egos and the acceptance. So like if it's 20 games in and it's like, well, we can click, but still got to get mine, right? Still got to get mine. Then it's a problem. So I'm actually more curious with question 2, which is, can D'Lo understand and accept that role? Because it's one thing to say, hey, DAngelo, the ball's going to come back around. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. But, he's a basketball player now, not 20 years ago. And he's a thought process of well, I'm a max type of player. I need mine, right? And so I think the real question is, can he accept that? Because the way that Ant is wired is so damn good. But the majority of guys in today's league, I don't think are like that. So can DAngelo Russell accept what you just said? Because what you just said, if he does accept it, could be outstanding. Mm-hmm. But if he's like, and it was weird last night. So it was at the opposite end of the court, near the free throw line, near the end of the first half. And I don't know which person was upset or what, but D'Lo and Ant had a really weird exchange, like sniping back and forth. And and it might have been Ant. So I'm not sure. D'Lo is during games super chill. So I don't think he would have been sniping, but it was just sort of an odd exchange. And it's like the type of thing where there does, from those two especially, probably need to be a maturity. Like Ant's maturing, but he's already mature in some ways. I feel like with Cat and D'Lo, that process is still unfolding, and it's like, okay, it's go time now.
Well, Cat
They're
is Cat is kind of who he is. Like Cat is a wonderfully talented player who I think has shown some improvement in the maturity department, but he's not. He's had enough time to set a culture for this franchise, and he hasn't. And that's honestly like whatever. That's if he's sort of the B. And the quicker Ant Edwards can just be the A,
which I think
I think
it's
the better for this franchise. Which I think is a good segue here.